Hi, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of some of the things I want you looking out for as you read Notes from Underground. Also, read through this week's discussion post question because those options you have to choose from there also will point you in the direction of looking at some of the common themes or elements of this novel that we examine as we examine it as on its own, but also as in some ways well, it is an example of this movement, the realism that we're exploring in this unit. Um, just a word of caution with movements and works that get slotted into them. No writer will very rarely create something, and the greats will not do it with, okay, well, I'm going to write this novel that's going to be a part of this realism movement, and this is my objective, and I'll do this and that. There are always going to be other filters in place as they write, even if they're consciously trying to um, embody the ideals of a movement. In other words, in realism, trying to really show things as they are. They're still going to be applying their own personal filters to that work of literature. Dostoevsky's very much him. His work very much shows the influence of his life, the challenges he faced, and the perspective on the world that those shaped in him. The slide here gives a few highlights of that. Um, he describes himself here as a realist in a higher sense. That is to say, I describe all the depths of the human soul. Well, what has shaped his understanding of the human soul? Well, among other things, because no one's life is completely shaped by the most interesting or terrible things that have happened to them, but among other things, early in life he received a death sentence. And as you read in the introduction, he got a reprieve at the last possible instant. So just imagine the psychology of going through the entire process of the trial and everything leading up to that moment where he was about to die. Um, if you want to get a sense of what he took away from that, we'll see that kind of maybe some of that in this novel, but also Crime and Punishment, which is absolutely brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. I really recommend that you read that as well. And it is a deep psychological exploration of somebody committing a crime and then dealing with the aftermath. He was exiled in Siberia for many years, which was not an easy thing. He suffered from epilepsy. He had a gambling issue. There are a lot of things that gave to him a more nuanced understanding of how people work and why they do the things that they do. This is an example. Your publisher included this in their resources, and I thought it was really interesting. It's notes. It's Dostoevsky's notes from a novel that he wrote, not this novel, but it's very interesting because we wonder how much the narrator in notes might reflect some of the author's outlook and perspectives, and we never assume they're the same, and they might be completely different. Authors will sometimes inject a bit of themselves into what they've written, but especially in the first person narrative, we have to be really careful about assuming that the author is talking to us. But still, look at the very kind of non-linear, um, um, jumbled, chaotic, or seemingly chaotic. I'm sure this made sense to him, but look at the map of his ideas here on this page. One of the things that the underground man faces is this sort of restless, rootless kind of urban intellectual lifestyle. He's bombarded with all sorts of ideas, science ideas, ideas from science, ideas from philosophy, from these progressive notions that were in the air at the time. And he can't quite reason his way to a satisfactory conclusion. Here you see these ideas all over the place, and not like a linear, okay, this is true, therefore this is true, therefore this is the answer. It's very interesting. It's probably drawing too much from a little bit, but I think it's a very interesting glimpse into how his mind worked to see how he made notes for this novel. Now, one of the things to be very conscious of is there's a first person narrative. I'm going to talk about the narrator in the next slide, but it's also in some ways a confessional. In other words, he's telling us about his life in a way, and we did not read Rousseau's Confessions, but similar to what Rousseau did. In this quote from the novel, he is actually citing another critic who challenges what Rousseau does, basically saying that a faithful, true autobiography is essentially impossible. Um, Rousseau, he says, but I think he's telling us to be on the lookout for him as well. Rousseau undoubtedly told untruths about himself in his confession and even lied intentionally. This is part of what opens the door to being skeptical of the autobiographer or the person who is kind of confessing his life is the idea that we don't necessarily know that we can trust the narrator of any novel, but especially modern novels. I wouldn't say especially because it does happen earlier on, but in a lot of modern novels, the writers are very conscious in creating characters who misrepresent themselves or don't understand themselves. Okay. In the first passage here, I'm a sick man, I'm a spiteful man, I'm the most unpleasant man. I think my liver is diseased. Then again, I don't know a thing about my illness. I'm not even sure what hurts. So he begins by confessing his failings, but then he admits how little he understands about himself. Here he's talking about a physical illness, but you can imply more than that. Okay. In the second passage, this is a good example, gentlemen, and I'll develop it. In the first place, these moans express all the aimlessness of the pain which consciousness finds so humiliating. The whole system of natural laws about which you really don't give a damn, but as a result of which you're suffering nonetheless, which nature isn't. This passage, he presents to you the core dilemma of the human attempt to express itself. The moans, and we can hear these moans as possibly this novel itself, or the monologue that a character gives when they're trying to explain this. Sorry about that. Um, they express aimlessness, pain, um, of consciousness here is described as, or this the pain, the suffering we go through is felt to be humiliating. It's degrading. It's natural laws imposing themselves on us, um, putting us into this case of suffering. What's remarkable is the suffering seems to be almost a uniquely human thing. He says here, nature isn't suffering. We are so aware of the mess we're in, we suffer far more than nature. What I want you to take away from this a little bit, listen to the narrator. Be conscious of the fact that he may not understand himself, or he may not represent himself fairly. We do see a lot, or honestly, we see a lot of him struggling with all these ideas coming at him. But he may not be presenting himself to us honestly, and where he thinks he is, he might not understand himself. He also creates an audience he's addressing, and this is really interesting. One of the questions has you thinking about this. Be aware of the audience's role in this novel as well. And I don't think there's a simple black and white, here's what the audience does. But he's not writing to a generic audience. He's crafted an audience. And he's also not just using the audience as someone to whom to tell a story. He uses the audience in very specific ways to kind of bounce these ideas. It's a bad way of putting it. We're sort of like a straw man against which he's sort of throwing this image of himself and his ideas he's wrestling with at us. Can you really be so gullible as to imagine that I'll print all this and give it to you to read? And here's another problem I have. Why do I keep calling you gentlemen? Why do I address you as if you were really my readers? I mean, that's a very interesting passage, and it reveals some of the nuance of his approach to this audience. He's telling you he's never going to show you this, so who are you? I keep calling you gentlemen. Why do I address you as if you were really my readers? What is his real purpose in writing this? And who does he imagine is actually going to read it, if anybody? Okay. The last thing to think about, and this comes up a lot in kind of the second part of the novel. One of the things that this character, is struggling with is a desire for freedom. And one of the things he wants to do is he wants society to change in a way that it will enable this human freedom to take place. As we get further and further into the novel, I want you to kind of look out for, how much does the author really have freedom? How much does he really control his actions? And how effective or ineffective is he in his attempts to kind of compel, my apologies, this is automatically going forward, to compel society? And to what extent is society, nature, compelling him? Okay, quick overview. Again, look at the discussion questions as well to get in, and do read the introduction carefully. I may post a few more resources if I come across them. But just be aware that this is a tricky novel, and the narrator is tricky. Enjoy it, but just keep your eyes open. Focus on these themes in particular, but you may stumble on things that I haven't noticed or no one's noticed. That's a beautiful thing about literature. Each reader brings to it something fresh.